Peter was always the brightest student in SS3 at Regent International School, but his intelligence was overshadowed by his negative behavior. He was known for being stubborn and a notorious bully. His classmates feared him, not just because of his strength, but because of his merciless taunts and manipulative ways. His arrogance was born out of a deep pain that he carried with him from home. Peter's parents were constantly at odds with each other. Their loud arguments filled their house, leaving little room for peace or love. Growing up in such a toxic environment had left Peter feeling unloved, cold, and angry. He translated this internal chaos into harshness, taking out his frustrations on others. Instead of receiving support or understanding, Peter's behavior only caused him to isolate himself further from those who could have helped him. His peers were too intimidated to confront him, and even the teachers had given up on trying to discipline him. Peter believed that being feared was the only way to protect himself from the vulnerability he felt inside. Love, kindness, and friendship were foreign concepts to him. He believed that if his own parents couldn't love him, then no one else would. So, he built a wall around his heart, using bullying as a shield. He felt powerful when others cowered in fear, but deep down, Peter was just a broken boy who didn't know how to express the pain that consumed him. Annabelle was the polar opposite of Peter. She was quiet, reserved, and focused on her studies. Despite being one of the best students academically, she often went unnoticed because of her introverted nature. She came from a poor background, which set her apart from most of her classmates at the prestigious Regent International School. Annabelle was only able to attend the school because of a scholarship she had earned through her hard work and dedication. However, this scholarship also became a source of mockery. Her classmates cruelly referred to her as the scholarship girl, often ridiculing her tattered uniforms and worn-out shoes. Unlike Peter, who used his pain to lash out, Annabelle had learned to internalize hers. She never let the mockery get to her. She didn't have the luxury of being distracted by bullies or fights. Every day, Annabelle watched her mother struggle to make ends meet, doing everything she could to ensure that Annabelle stayed in school. This knowledge motivated Annabelle to remain focused. She couldn't afford to let the bullying deter her from her goals. Even though she was lonely and isolated, Annabelle found comfort in her books and her dreams of a better future. She dreamed of becoming a doctor so that she could help others and lift her family out of poverty. Her quiet strength allowed her to endure the cruelty of her classmates without complaint, and though she had no friends to lean on, Annabelle never gave up hope. The day their paths crossed marked the beginning of an unexpected journey. After yet another incident of bullying, Peter was finally caught in the act. The teachers had had enough of his antics and decided to punish him by making him sweep the entire school premises for a week. For someone like Peter, this punishment was a massive blow to his pride. He was used to getting away with everything, and now, for the first time, he was being held accountable for his actions. But instead of accepting the punishment, Peter immediately began looking for a way out. He scanned the school grounds, searching for someone who could take the fall for him. That's when he spotted Annabelle, sitting quietly under a tree, absorbed in her book. An evil smirk crossed his face as he approached her. Peter was used to getting what he wanted, and he saw Annabelle as an easy target. She was always alone, and her timid nature made her an easy victim. Looming over her, he demanded that she complete his punishment for him. Fear flickered in Annabelle's eyes as she looked up at him. She had seen Peter's bullying firsthand and knew what he was capable of. Despite her fear, Annabelle tried to resist, but Peter's threats were too much for her to handle. Reluctantly, she agreed, and from that moment, she found herself caught in Peter's web. Little did they both know, this encounter would change the course of their lives. As Annabelle stood there, trembling under Peter's shadow, she felt a wave of fear wash over her. She had never wanted to be involved with someone like him, someone who thrived on causing pain to others. But in that moment, Annabelle didn't see any other option. Peter's threats echoed in her mind, and the last thing she wanted was to become his next target. She had already endured so much mockery from her classmates, and the thought of being bullied by Peter terrified her. With no one to turn to for help, Annabelle reluctantly agreed to sweep the school premises on Peter's behalf. The next morning, she arrived at school before anyone else, broom in hand. Her heart pounded as she began the task, knowing that Peter was watching her from a distance. He had positioned himself on a nearby bench, making sure that no teachers would catch on to his scheme. As Annabelle swept, she felt a mix of emotions, anger, fear, and frustration. She didn't deserve this. All she wanted was to focus on her studies, to make her mother proud, and to achieve her dreams. But now, she found herself caught in Peter's manipulation, forced to do his work while he sat back and watched. Her hands quickly became blistered from the broom, but she didn't dare complain. She had learned long ago that complaining never changed anything. All she could do was keep her head down and endure the situation, hoping that it would be over soon. Over the next few days, the strange routine continued. Annabelle would arrive early to sweep, and Peter would sit on a nearby bench, keeping a watchful eye to ensure no teachers caught on to what was happening. At first, Peter didn't think much of Annabelle. To him, she was just another student he could manipulate to get his way. But as the days went by, something unexpected began to happen. Peter found himself watching her more closely. There was something different about Annabelle, something that intrigued him. She never complained, even when her hands were raw from the sweeping. She didn't fight back or try to resist, yet she didn't seem weak either. Instead, Peter noticed a quiet determination in her actions, a strength that he had never seen in anyone before. It was as if she had made peace with her situation, choosing to endure rather than retaliate. This puzzled Peter. He had always believed that power came from making others fear you, yet Annabelle's strength seemed to come from a different place entirely. The more he watched her, the more curious he became. Why didn't she fight back? Why didn't she let the bullying get to her? These questions began to swirl in Peter's mind, challenging the way he had always viewed the world. For the first time, he started to question his own behavior and the reasons behind it. Without realizing it, Annabelle had begun to change Peter's perspective on life. On the third day of their strange arrangement, Peter couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. As Annabelle finished sweeping, he unexpectedly spoke up, asking her a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why don't you ever fight back?" he asked, surprising even himself with the question. Annabelle looked at him, wiping the sweat from her brow. She could see the genuine curiosity in his eyes, and after a moment's hesitation, she decided to answer honestly. "Because it won't change anything," she replied quietly. "I have more important things to focus on, like my studies. I can't afford to be distracted by fights or bullies." Her words took Peter by surprise. He had always seen life as a battle, where only the strongest survived by overpowering others. But Annabelle's approach was different. She wasn't driven by a need to prove herself or gain power over others. Instead, she was focused on her goals and her future. Her calm acceptance of the situation left Peter feeling unsettled. For so long, he had believed that anger and aggression were the only ways to cope with the pain he felt inside. But Annabelle had shown him that there was another way, a way that didn't involve hurting others. Her quiet strength and determination had given Peter a new perspective on life, one that he had never considered before. And for the first time, he began to wonder if he had been wrong all along. Peter couldn't stop thinking about Annabelle's words. Her calmness in the face of adversity puzzled him, a stark contrast to how he approached life. He had always believed that force and intimidation were the only ways to survive, but here was Annabelle, quietly standing her ground without ever raising her voice. She wasn't wealthy or powerful, but she had a kind of strength that Peter had never encountered before. That strength fascinated him, but it also made him uncomfortable because it forced him to confront the ugliness in himself. Every morning, he would see her sweeping the schoolyard, her face calm and focused, and he would feel a pang of guilt. He had mocked her for weeks, yet she never lost her composure. How could she be so patient and resilient? It made him question everything he thought he knew about life. As the days passed, Peter found himself drawn to her, not out of any romantic interest, but out of pure curiosity. He started asking her questions, not just out of boredom but because he genuinely wanted to understand her. Annabelle was hesitant at first, unsure if she could trust him. But slowly, she opened up, telling him about her life, her mother's sacrifices, and her dreams of becoming a doctor. Her stories were full of hardship, but she spoke of them with hope, not bitterness. Peter found himself listening more intently than he ever had before, realizing that there was a whole world beyond his narrow view of life. One morning, as they sat in the quiet schoolyard, Peter couldn't hold it in any longer. The guilt he had been carrying around was weighing heavily on his shoulders. He looked at Annabelle, who was quietly reading a book, and the words just tumbled out of his mouth. "I'm sorry," he said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant, as though he wasn't sure how to properly apologize. Annabelle looked up, surprised. She hadn't expected him to say those words. For weeks, Peter had been the source of her torment, but now, he seemed different, softer, less guarded. Peter ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she had come to recognize. "I shouldn't have threatened you. I've been wrong about a lot of things," he confessed. His eyes were full of regret, something Annabelle had never seen in him before. She could sense that he was being genuine. This wasn't just a half-hearted apology, it was the start of something deeper. "Why did you do it?" she asked gently, not out of anger but out of a need to understand. She had always wondered why someone like Peter, who seemed to have everything, could harbor so much anger. Peter sighed, leaning back against the wall. "I guess, I've always been angry. At my parents, at life. I never thought it was wrong to take it out on others," he admitted, his voice laced with guilt. "But, I see now that it was." His honesty surprised her, but it also gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, he could change. Annabelle's smile was soft, almost encouraging, as though she understood the weight of Peter's confession. She looked at him, not with pity but with a gentle understanding that made him feel more vulnerable than he ever had before. "You don't have to let your parents' actions define you, Peter," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. Her words were simple, but they held a depth that resonated with him. For so long, Peter had blamed his parents for everything that had gone wrong in his life, but now, hearing Annabelle's words, he realized that maybe he didn't have to be stuck in that cycle of anger and resentment. "We all have struggles," Annabelle continued, her eyes holding his, "but we can choose how we respond to them." Peter felt something shift inside him, something that had been dormant for years. No one had ever spoken to him like this before. Most people either feared him or avoided him, but Annabelle, she saw him differently. She didn't just see the bully he had become, she saw the person he could be. It was a strange feeling, being seen in that way, and it made him want to be better, not just for her but for himself. Peter had always thought that strength came from power and control, but now, he was beginning to see that real strength came from kindness and understanding. Annabelle's quiet courage had taught him more in a few weeks than he had learned in his entire life. He knew that he couldn't change overnight, but he also knew that he didn't want to be the person he had been anymore. From that day forward, Peter made a conscious effort to change. It wasn't easy, years of anger and resentment didn't just disappear overnight, but he was determined to be different. He stopped bullying others, choosing instead to focus on his studies and his growing friendship with Annabelle. Whenever he saw classmates mocking her, he would step in, his once intimidating presence now serving to protect rather than harm. People were shocked at first, unable to believe that Peter, the feared bully, was now defending the very person he had tormented. But Peter didn't care about their opinions anymore. He had found something far more valuable than his old reputation. He had found a friend in Annabelle, and that friendship meant more to him than anything else. Peter started to notice how people's attitudes towards him began to change as well. The fear and avoidance that had once surrounded him was slowly replaced by a kind of quiet respect. He wasn't the same person anymore, and people were beginning to see that. Annabelle, too, was changing. With Peter by her side, she found the courage to stand up for herself more, her confidence growing with each passing day. The bullying she had endured for so long began to fade as people realized that Peter would always be there to defend her. For the first time in his life, Peter felt like he was doing something right. He wasn't just existing, he was actually making a positive impact on someone else's life. And that feeling, it was better than any sense of power or control he had ever experienced. He realized that this was the person he wanted to be, someone who stood up for what was right, someone who could be proud of himself. As the weeks went by, Peter and Annabelle became inseparable. They started studying together for their final exams, finding a rhythm that worked for both of them. Annabelle was patient and focused, helping Peter with subjects he had always struggled with. She had a way of explaining things that made them seem simple, and for the first time in his life, Peter felt like he could actually succeed academically. In return, Peter helped Annabelle stay strong in the face of their classmates' mockery. He encouraged her to ignore the whispers and the stares, reminding her that they were just jealous of her strength and determination. Their study sessions became more than just preparation for exams, they became a time for them to connect on a deeper level. Peter learned more about Annabelle's life, her dreams, and her fears, and Annabelle began to see the person Peter was becoming. She admired his dedication and his willingness to change, and she found herself looking forward to their time together more and more. As their bond grew stronger, the bullying that had once plagued Annabelle's life started to diminish. People began to leave her alone, realizing that she wasn't someone to be mocked anymore. Peter's presence by her side sent a clear message: Annabelle was no longer an easy target. And with that realization came a newfound peace for Annabelle. She could finally focus on her studies without the constant fear of being ridiculed. For Peter, this new friendship was like a lifeline. He had never had someone like Annabelle in his life, someone who saw the good in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. And as they spent more time together, Peter began to realize that he didn't want to lose her, not just as a friend, but as something more. After weeks of studying, the final exams were finally over, and graduation was just around the corner. The school was buzzing with excitement, but Peter couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his chest. As happy as he was to be finishing school, he couldn't bear the thought of losing the connection he had built with Annabelle. The thought of her walking out of his life after everything they had been through together was almost unbearable. One evening, after they had finished their last study session, Peter couldn't keep his feelings to himself any longer. His heart was pounding in his chest as he nervously turned to Annabelle. "Annabelle, would you be my girlfriend?" he asked, his voice shaky with uncertainty. I don't want to be far from you after school ends." Annabelle looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She hadn't expected him to ask her that, but as she looked into his eyes, she could see the sincerity behind his words. Peter had changed so much since the first time they met, and she knew that he wasn't the same person who had threatened her weeks ago. He was someone who had grown, who had learned, and who had become a better person. Smiling softly, she nodded. "I'd like that," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. Peter let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief washing over him. As they stood there, the sun setting behind them, Peter realized that meeting Annabelle had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. And for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about the future.